welcome back to the second episode of my wedding slash marriage series. So I did start this last week, so if you haven't watched my first video, I'll go ahead and put it right up here so you guys can go ahead and check it out. So for my episode number 2, I'm basically going to be giving you guys tips on what to do after you just got engaged. I think that was like one of the biggest questions that I had as soon as I got engaged. So if you're interested, go ahead and just keep on watching. So when I got engaged, for me, it was very hard to know what to do after. I think like the day that I got engaged and maybe like the next 3 or 4 days, I was just kind of soaking in the moment of being engaged, the happiness, the joy, the excitement. But I think like after that 4 or 5 days went by, I was trying to figure out what to do next. And I feel like that's one of the biggest questions that many brides have is, what do I do next? Where do I start? What am I even supposed to be doing? So that was kind of basically my question throughout the whole time, especially because I was the first one in my family to get married through the church. So no one really knew like what to do or where to start with. So I kind of had to like navigate that on my own. So basically what I have here is my little notebook, and I basically wrote down all the tips that helped me when I was planning my wedding and all the tips that were really beneficial at the time. So I wanted to go ahead and share them with you guys. So for my tip number 1, the most important thing I feel like you really need to start with is figuring out what your budget is going to be. So when I mention the budget, I'm basically talking about like where are you going to spend that money, and then how much are you willing to put into your wedding. And with the budgeting, it's talking about like the venue, the vendors, the food, the drinks, the decorations, your dress, your partner's dress or tux. So you basically really have to figure out one solid number so you can purchase all those different things. So I know when I was planning my wedding, Jesus and I sat down and we both gave each other a budget, and we kind of met in the middle, just because I knew that when we were going to go out to see venues or vendors, the first thing that they were going to ask us is, what is your budget? What's your price range? And I really didn't want to go in there saying like, I think it's going to be this much, or I don't even know. Just because then you get to look at venues that are going to be already in your price range, instead of going to a venue that is really expensive and then you fall in love with it and then you can't get it because it's too expensive. I think that happened to us one time. I didn't check the price range and we went to go see it, and I fell in love with it so much. I just loved how it all looked, but it was way over our budget, and I was so sad because I was like, this is not in our budget. I should have checked that beforehand. So that's why I say like figuring out a budget is so important, especially when you go not just the venue but your vendors as well. Usually when you go and maybe get a photographer or your DJ, they're gonna ask you like, what's your price range? So you really want to have that already in hand for each vendor. So kind of make maybe an Excel sheet or maybe write it down so you kind of already have an idea of what you're gonna be telling them, so that you're not in there kind of overwhelmed by all the questions they're gonna be asking you. One tip that really helped me when it came to like the whole budgeting thing and making sure I was contacting people that was in my budget was using the website called Zola. I actually made Jesus and mine like wedding registry in there, and it helped so much. You have like little tabs where you can look at venues. You put in like where you're from. So for me, it was like Palm Desert, California, and it basically gave me a whole bunch of lists of all the venues that were around my area, and it kind of gives you like an approximation of like how much it costs, and then also their phone number, plus it shows you like how much they can seat, so how many people can actually be in the venue, because that also varies a lot when it comes to looking for a venue. So definitely check out that website, Zola. I'll go ahead and put it somewhere up here so you guys can go ahead and check it out, because literally they have a list of like venues, a list of caterers, a list of hairstylists and makeup artists, also DJs, basically all the vendors that you might have in mind. You can go ahead and look it all in that one website instead of having to go from website to website, and it kind of gets a little bit more overwhelming. So for my tip number 2, I think this is also a very important thing to have, is talking about when you want your wedding to be, right? So for us, we sat down again and we were trying to figure out like, when do we want to get married? So we live in an area where it's super hot in the summer. It's probably like 118 as we speak right now. So we both knew that we were not going to be having a summer wedding. I always loved the idea of having a summer wedding, but I knew that where I lived was just not going to be possible, and we just didn't really want to risk the whole like makeup melting and all that stuff. So we knew we didn't want it to be a summer wedding, so we were looking at other seasons, right? We were kind of looking into like fall and winter at the time, just because those are the times where it's a little bit more colder and we don't really have to worry about the sun being out or it being too hot. So we ended up doing December wedding. I feel like December wedding is really beautiful, but at the same time it's very tricky, just because many people are saving up to either go on a trip for Christmas, go on a trip for New Year's, maybe saving up money for Christmas for their children or their family members. Just take into consideration those little things when it comes to setting a date for your wedding. We already had maybe 2 dates in mind. One was going to be like the last weekend of November, and then the other one was going to be December 7th. We already had like those 2 dates set, so that whenever we did go to look at the venue, the question that they ask you is, when do you plan on getting married? And you do want to have like a day so they can actually see if they're even available before you even go ahead and check out the whole venue itself. And then I recommend having at least 2, maybe 3 dates in mind, just in case you really do fall in love with the venue, but maybe the first option that you had, they don't have it available. You at least have a second option, if not maybe a third option. So definitely go ahead and be prepared for like the dates, and figure out maybe weather conditions also, like where you live. If maybe November, December is like too rainy, maybe pick maybe your summer season or things like that. So try to figure that out with your partner to see kind of when you plan on having that wedding date, just because it's also going to help you with other vendors to see when they are available as well. Now for tip number 3 is picking out a theme. So I definitely recommend you guys picking out a theme before going out and actually looking at venues, because this is another question that they are going to ask you, is basically, what do you have in mind? How do you want your theme to be? What do you like? For me, I don't think I ever really had a theme for any party that I've ever had, so I knew this was going to be a very difficult thing for me to do. I know Jesus and I have very like similar tastes and kind of like what we like, and Jesus is very simple, so I knew that I had to really think about what theme I actually wanted for the day of my wedding. A website that really did help me was Pinterest. I honestly use Pinterest for the whole entire wedding process, just because it gives you so many ideas. So what I did was I inputted there like wedding themes, and I basically looked at a bunch of pictures to see what really catched my eye. And then once you choose on that one picture that you like, on the bottom it'll give you like more pictures that are similar to the one that you actually like. So you kind of go ahead and maybe save that, screenshot it. Basically, it's going to be really easy to maybe show it to your venues and tell them like, this is kind of what I had in mind. Sometimes it'll even tell you exactly what the theme is. It might say elegant, it might say classy, whatever the case is. So you can mention that to your venue, you know, like my theme, I want it to be very classy. For me, I ended up doing a very like classy, elegant wedding theme, and then my color schemes were burgundy, blush, and also rose gold. It's another very important thing to have in mind is your color scheme. Maybe you don't know exactly what the theme is, but you do want to have maybe a color scheme to go off by to see kind of like what you have in mind, just because many venues also carry like the color linens, so you can kind of ask if they have that color, or maybe if you're gonna have to purchase that from someone else. So it's also a very important thing to take into consideration. Now for my tip number 4, which is probably one of the hardest one that we honestly had to figure out, but it's also very, very important to do before you actually go out and look at venues or vendors, is the big question of how many people are coming to your wedding and who are you inviting. So for us, I think this one was very hard just because we didn't really know exactly how many people, because if it was for us, it would have been like an open wedding for like all our friends and our families, but we had to make sure that our list consisted of friends and families that we were actually really close to, and not just people that we kind of see like once a year. So this is where it gets a little bit more complicated, because sometimes your family might want to invite some of their relatives who maybe you don't speak to. So you kind of have to decide if you're going to invite them or if you're going to just keep it to a very like close list. For us, we knew that we wanted to walk into our wedding and be able to say hi to everyone. We really wanted to be a room filled with people that we actually know and not just people that we see like once a year. So when it came to our guest list, we wrote every person down, and then we also counted to see how many people we had on our list, just because that's another very important question that they're going to ask you is how many people are you inviting, or how many people are going to be coming to your wedding. So you kind of want to have already like an approximation of how many people. It doesn't have to be set in stone, but you do kind of want to have like an average number so you can see if they even fit in the venue, if it's going to be too cramped, or if it's going to be just the perfect size. So when you're making that guest list, you kind of have to talk to your partner about who you're inviting and then make that list kind of finalized. So it's just easier when you do make the appointments, or when you do make also the wedding invitations, because that also costs money as well. So you kind of want to make sure that when you're making that guest list, figure out who you're going to invite, and then already have a number of how many you think are going to be coming and how many you actually have as a guest list. Just because it's going to be a little bit more easier when it comes to finding in the venue, and also when it comes to catering, because they're going to basically charge you like per plate. So you don't want to have too many plates and then you kind of just spend money on food that's not even eaten by anyone, right? So you want to make sure that you have that guest list already in mind, so it makes it a little bit more easier for you guys. And then for my last tip, which is tip number 5, is if you are planning to get married like through the church, like us, we got married through the church, so we had to figure out a church that was able to have that date available the same day that the venue had that date available as well. Same thing going back to figuring out that date, you really want to have that also for the ceremony as well. So for us, I knew I had to look for a church that was able to marry us without Jesus having his confirmation, because he still didn't have it at the time. So many churches don't marry you if you don't have like those requirements already beforehand. So I knew that I had to find a church in advance to see and ask those questions. Luckily, I was able to find one church, and I'm so happy that we got married there because it's so beautiful and the staff was just very nice and very welcoming. So they actually let us get married while Jesus was taking the classes at the time. So he didn't need to finish it by the time he got married, but he did have to be enrolled in it at least. So I was really happy about that. So definitely take that into consideration too. If you're gonna have maybe like an outside wedding, same thing goes. You definitely want to contact them in advance to see if they are available for the set dates that you kind of have in mind, just so that it makes it easier for you to do, and you're not kind of worrying about like the big thing when it comes to a wedding, and you kind of just have to do like the smaller things like the wedding invitations, decorations, like little things like that. It just makes everything just a lot more smoother. So yeah guys, that concludes today's video. I hope you guys really did enjoy it, and I hope that these tips are very helpful for you. If you are a bride to be, congratulations. I wish you all nothing but the best. So if you like this video, don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe down below to be part of my journey here on YouTube. Don't forget to hit that post notification button to be notified every time I post a new video, and I'll go ahead and see you guys on the next one. Bye guys.